And so perhaps I'll start with Stephanie. Tell us your organization and really what you're responsible for.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Smith. I'm currently the incoming president for COG, which is the CANDU's owners group. That is a nonprofit that has a membership of all utilities, both in Canada and internationally, that have a CANDU reactor. So we are a nonprofit. We work a lot on joint projects, collaboration, OPEX sharing, that type of thing. A little bit about me personally. I have 30 years experience in the nuclear industry with Ontario Power Generation. I am an engineer. I started way back in 1990. I have experience. I was a certified shift manager at the Pickering plant, so I was responsible for the daily operations of the Pickering 5/8 side on shift. I also was the manager at the Pickering site, so I was responsible for 800 maintenance staff and all maintenance activities at the Pickering site. I also was the plant manager for 2 years at the Pickering site, so responsible for all 6 units and all the staff on site, everything that you can imagine that would go along with being the plant manager of Pickering. I did that for 2 years. I completed a secondment down in the US at IMPO, which is the NWANO, which is the World Association of Nuclear Operations. Spent 6 months there traveling the US, going to different nuclear facilities and evaluate them as part of the IMPO and NWANO evaluation teams. And then I came back to Ontario Power Generation. I was the deputy site vice president for the Darlington site, and now I've made the jump to COG. So I'm very glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Linda, I'll turn it to you. Tell us about your current title in your organization and what you're responsible for.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Good morning, everybody. My name is Linda Beairsto, and I'm thrilled to be with you here today. After spending 6 years in the power and utilities sector as a senior executive, namely as Chief General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer, I now lead MTLine as its president. MTLine is a fully integrated division of the Bay Street law firm of McCarthy Tétrault. MTLine provides innovative and custom staffing solutions for clients through the engagement of high caliber independent contract lawyers and the use of AI technology. In addition, I am a founding member of the steering committee of Women in Energy in Canada.
Excellent. Thank you. And Lisa, if you could round off the panel with your introduction.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in this panel. I actually wear 2 hats in the nuclear industry. I'm twice as blessed, I guess. So I'm the president of Women in Nuclear Canada, which is an organization with almost 3,000 members across the country. Our goal is a couple of things. First is to educate the public on the use and benefits of nuclear and radiation technologies in society. The second is to promote and enable career development among our members so that they can achieve their career aspirations. And we do that through various means such as leadership development, professional development, knowledge and experience exchange. And then the third pillar is to promote career interest among women and young people in nuclear and radiation related fields, as well as STEM and skilled trades. My day job, my other job, I work at Ontario Power Generation. I am the manager of nuclear stakeholder relations, and in that function, I do a couple of things. I interface with the broader industry, World Association of Nuclear Operators for OPG. I execute independent oversight activities on behalf of the Chief Nuclear Officer. And then I oversee our nuclear management system for the nuclear enterprise. So lots of fun.
Interesting. That sounds like all 3 of you, in fact, have fairly complicated jobs. It's nice to be able to kind of get this time to hear from you directly on your career and sort of how you've gotten to be in these roles. I think I'd like to start with, how did you get involved in the energy sector, or more specifically the nuclear sector, in the first place? And Stephanie, if I could start with you, what was it, sort of right out of graduation, or did you come to it after trying some other industries? Because obviously it's stuck.
Yeah, so it did stick. So I was very fortunate. I attended university at the University of Toronto. And in my fourth year, they organized a field trip to the Darlington site. We went on a field trip, and the plant was under construction at that time. And part of the tour is you went to the main control room. And I'm a little bit older, I think, and I'm a big Star Trek fan, right? So it was so cool. It looked like, all these buttons and all this kind of cool stuff going on. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to, run a power plant. So when I graduated from the University of Toronto, I made sure I got my application into, at that time it was Ontario Hydro. And lo and behold, they hired me. So I joined straight out of university, and let's just say I got to be Captain Kirk on shift. So worked out well.
Fantastic, terrific story. And Linda, when you joined Algonquin, what was the pull? What was the invitation that made you do that?
Well, actually, Laurie, started earlier than that. I was attracted to the energy sector very early on in my legal career while at DuPont. At DuPont, and by the way, I joined DuPont, a science company, and I can barely solve a chemical equation even to this day. So they took a chance with me. So when I was at DuPont, a small team of us, three of us, we won the prestigious DuPont 2004 Global Sustainable Growth Award for a visionary wind and energy efficient project in Kingston, Ontario. Then in 2010, I was approached by Algonquin Power and Utilities to be its chief general counsel. And in that role, I was tasked with building and implementing and growing a legal department and compliance department in both Canada and in the US. And as the only woman in the C-suite, together with 6 other men, we grew the company from under $1 billion in enterprise value to $12 billion in 6 years. So today, other than my full-time role, I spend time volunteering, helping other women in the energy sector who are interested in entering into this space by serving as I said earlier on, founding member of the steering committee of Women in Energy Canada.
Yeah, fascinating. And Lisa, how about you? When was the starting point for you in the industry?
So the starting point for me was actually after a number of years having worked. I actually started my career in corrections. I worked in the correctional industry, so with the province, and there was a shift in funding that was happening. So it was not long after 9/11 that the nuclear security team at Ontario Power Generation was expanding, and they were recruiting. And so I joined the organization in nuclear security as a frontline nuclear security officer, searching people, vehicles, and things, and the rest is really history. It was interesting to me because at that time, the work was going to be interesting. It was definitely going to be of value in the community and society. So was really looking forward to that. So that was kind of my jump into this industry.
Interesting. And just a follow-on question, when you told your family and friends that you were going to take on this role at a nuclear facility, what was the reaction?
So actually my grandfather had worked in construction actually on the Darlington site. And so my grandfather thought that it was great. Of course, they were interested to hear. I come from a background of skilled trades. And so they were very interested to hear, what it's like to work in a nuclear power plant. What does it look like on the inside? Can you take me on a tour? They were definitely very supportive and understanding in terms of what the opportunity was going to bring.
Excellent. It sounds like some fair curiosity and pride as well. Stephanie, when you kind of announced that was the role you were taking after graduating from U of T, did you get a similar response from family and friends?
I think like when I went to engineering school, that was back in the 80s. So it was a lot. How can I say it? It was kind of hard to, as a woman, to kind of explain what I did. So my family's always been extremely supportive of me. And I made sure that I talked a lot about my role and stuff. So they're very proud of me. In particular, my family, I'm the first one to graduate university in my family, so it was kind of a big deal. And yeah, so they're very proud of me.
It's very cool. Very neat. I'm inspired already, and we just started. Thank you. Turning to leadership, because that's something that's kind of on the minds of people in the nuclear industry, but beyond that as well. The question is, when did you first discover that you were, in fact, a leader? And was it part of a plan, or did it kind of happen organically? And Linda, maybe I'll start with you, and sort of when you kind of figured it out.
That's a great question, Laura. I would have to say upon reflection that I knew I was born to be a leader, I guess, through my experience as an 8-year-old child growing up in a small island in the Fiji Islands, a small town in the Fiji Islands. There I witnessed injustice and discrimination against some of our Indigenous students. So that bothered me very much because I felt it was incongruous with the Christian values that I was taught. As such, I became a voice for the marginalized members of our society, namely our Indigenous students. Needless to say, my teacher was not pleased with me, and in the only report card that I remember, my grade 4 teacher said that I needed to mind my own business. But how could I who was privileged, how could I ignore others who were not so privileged and were discriminated against? You see, even at the age of 8, the words of the great Rabbi Hillel resonated with me, and his words in part were, if I am not for others, who am I? At that young age, I had instilled in me the value that others first and me last. And that has become a guiding leadership principle for me even today, and it has indeed been my guiding principle throughout my legal career.
Fascinating. Very interesting. Lisa, when was the kind of blinding moment when you realized, oh, I'm a leader now?
My plan, it was definitely organic. So when I joined the nuclear security team at Pickering, I worked for a fabulous leader. His name was Lawrence Coombs. And at some point, fairly early in my career, he sort of took me aside and wanted to talk to me about taking on more accountabilities and moving into leadership. And I remember being somewhat overwhelmed by that, just where I had come from, and the idea of working in a nuclear power plant with so many people, it was interesting. But I do remember him saying to me, you're going to be my boss one day, which seemed, it was incomprehensible to me because, he was fairly senior to me, and I felt like I had so many more years to go in terms of developing my skills and competencies. But he basically took me under his wing and we worked together on my leadership skills, and his prediction was right. We became peers over a number of years, and then I eventually became his boss. And I think it was the biggest compliment I think I've had in my career was when I left that department to go to a corporate function, and he said to me, if you're leaving, I want to come work for you. And so it was definitely organic in my journey.
Excellent. And Stephanie, how about for you?
So for me, when I first joined as a young engineer at Ontario Hydro at that time, being in the technical role, and I really thought at that point, like, what do I want to do with my career? Do I want to be the engineer that sits in the corner and does analysis, or am I better at dealing with people and pulling people together? So, excuse me. Excuse me. I applied for a manager job when I was still a technical person, and I got the job. And I think what really defined me as a leader is when I took this role, there was some difficult issues that needed resolving regarding people issues. And the leader that had been in the role before had just ignored these issues. And when I came into the job, I looked around and I saw, the way that this issue was affecting the staff. And I thought, me as the leader, I have to be the leader here, and I have to have some difficult conversations. And that's part of being a leader's job. And, once I got through that initial sort of hump, because the first time you ever go through anything as a leader, the first time you go through a difficult situation and you have to have difficult conversations, you have to internalize and you have to think about what kind of person do I want to be. And once I got through that, I realized, this is something that I want to continue doing. I want to be able to, help, my mind as a leader is somebody that people want to come and work with, not for, you want to work with, right? And that the people that you work with know your expectations, and they know that you are always having the best of the group and as the business in mind. And I think that's really what defined me as a leader.
It's interesting. I'm going to divert for a second, just taking that theme of what it is to be a leader. I mean, certainly the nuclear industry is extremely risk adverse. There's a lot of safety processes and procedures and things that absolutely must be followed. And so how do you balance those requirements with being the kind of leader that you described, which sounds a little bit more collaborative, a little bit more more inclusive, and not perhaps quite as command and control? And how do you balance that?
Because yes, we are a highly regimented industry. So, for example, I was a shift manager. So, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was responsible for the operation of the plant. And if the unit came down, there was decisions to be made, right? And, the way that I always approach those decisions is, yes, we have very tight regulations that are governing the way that we respond, but it's the people that are responsible for making those decisions and fostering a collaboration, right? So that there's very few things in the industry, and I ran a power plant. There's very few things you have to jump over a chair and make a quick decision. Believe it or not, even running a nuclear power plant, there are very few times where you have to jump off the desk and hit a button. So you work together as a team. You get to know your team members, what they're capable of, what they contribute, and you use all of that together as a leader to help the organization move forward.
Fascinating. And Lisa, I imagine you would have had the same kind of constraints is maybe not the right word, but starting out in security and then moving into the other roles that you've had. How does your leadership kind of respect the process and the requirements, but also allow for maybe a more human side, collaborative side?
So I guess for me, I always approached it in terms of it's about building trust with people. So people, when you're a leader, people need to trust you, and you need to be able to trust them, and you need to understand the capabilities, the skill sets, the competencies that everybody brings to the table. And as a leader, I certainly I don't always have all the answers, but I know who does, and it's really a team effort, and it is about working together. And for me, it was about the trust factor.
Yeah, I love that. I don't have all the answers, but I know who does. I think that's genius. And Linda, I know that you've got some feelings about this and the environments that you've been in, and legal situations where you're providing that kind of advice. Again, very structured, but how have you been able to keep that kind of human element in it?
At DuPont, and certainly at Algonquin, it's a highly regulated industry, and so safety is paramount. Everything is guided by safety, and so the safety value for me resonates with my own personal value, and that is everybody. I am my brother's keeper, so your safety is paramount. To me. So that's the first thing I would say. The second, in terms of leadership, and Laura, you wrote a great article, as I was saying, about resumes, and you and I had this discussion yesterday. And if I had to summarize my resume and my own leadership style, it would be, I'm all about servant leadership, and that is about serving others, the inverted pyramid, where the leaders, the C-suite, in a sense, is at the bottom of the pyramid, and others, the stakeholder, is at the top. And so if I had to summarize my leadership style, it is truly about creating super teams, as opposed to creating superstars. So it is really about collaboration, and it is about service. It is about having a service ethos, and with safety being the paramount guiding principle, especially in a regulated industry like nuclear energy and utilities.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thanks very much. Lisa, you had mentioned earlier on in our conversation about someone that you recognized early on that that gave you some good words of wisdom and sort of helped you put stuff into perspective. If the three of you would think back to mentors, sure, but many of us don't actually have access to a formalized mentorship program. But I think we can all point to models, people who led their lives, their responsibilities, took care of their teams in ways that you kind of looked at that and said, I want to model that behavior. And so who would you point to? It's a name, but someone in a role that you looked at them and said, okay, I'm going to model myself after the way they make decisions, they manage their people, they take care of things. And at what point in your career did you recognize that, and what impact did it have? I know it's a meatier question, but this is something I think for all people managing their careers that's really important. And Lisa, I would like to start with you if that's okay.
Sure. So I mentioned Lawrence. So Lawrence was early in my career, and he's recently retired, but has continued to be a mentor. So definitely he was a mentor and a model. So basically, when you don't know what to do, it's really what would Lawrence do? And then, so I had Lawrence as a mentor, both formal and informal over the years. And then I did have another mentor who his name was Dave, and he worked in labor relations. And early into my journey as a leader in a unionized environment, I took some training, and he delivered the training. And at the end of that training, I actually thought, I need to know how to do that. He had a way with people, he had charisma, he understood how to problem solve, and he understood people, which is essentially that. And so I actually, I would say Dave was a model, and I reached out to him and basically tapped him on the shoulder and said, I want to learn to do all of that. What you just talked about in 2 days, I want to learn, everything you can possibly teach me. And so I think that those are two key people. And as my career has, as my journey continues, I would say those were men in the early days, and now I actually am blessed to have a number of key women that I would call mentors and models. And so it's a lot more than Lawrence's name who hits the list when I don't know what to do. It's not necessarily what would Lawrence do, but there's a whole list of people that I kind of can cycle through. I do just want to put in a little plug, if I might. WIN Canada, we're excited to be launching a mentor program later this year. And for anybody who might be listening in who doesn't know, our membership is free. So the price is perfect. It's right for everyone. And so I would encourage maybe members on this page and people who are watching to take a look and watch for that later in the year, because mentorship is so very important to women in their career journey. And we recognize that. So we're excited about that.
Excellent. And Linda, can you point to a couple of either formal mentors or models that you kind of aspire to be like?
Thank you, Laura. Actually, there are three people, and I get three individuals in three areas. So one is a mentor, and one is a role model, and the other is an executive coach. So in terms of mentors, I've been blessed throughout my career to have informal mentors, people who are kind and generous enough to take me aside and to guide me without having me asking them. And just as important as having mentors, it is really, really important to have great bosses at the start of your career, if at all possible. And so I was blessed when I started off as a junior lawyer. The head of the real estate department pulled me aside and basically helped train me to be a good lawyer. So I'm forever grateful to him. And later on at DuPont, we had a fantastic CEO in the form of Dave Koklu, who again was charismatic, and he preached safety. Safety was paramount, and just the way he treated his employee, it was something to be emulated. And now today, I am fortunate to have an executive coach. An executive coach that I had when I was at Algonquin, and I continue to have today. In addition to the mentors and role models and coach, I just also wanted to put a plug for Women in Energy Canada. We do have a formal mentorship program. Again, membership is free. And in the last year, we've been successful at placing mentors with mentees. So if anyone is interested in joining, we have a fantastic mentorship program.
Excellent. And Stephanie, who would you point to, both either as a formal mentor from a program perspective, or perhaps models that kind of showed you the way?
So when I spoke earlier about my first job as a supervisor manager, I was very fortunate at that time to have a woman who was the department manager, and her name is Lori Swami, and I think people recognize the name Lori Swami. So I had I was very fortunate to be able to work for her early in my career. And, she, the way that she conducted herself and the way that she addressed issues and the way that she communicated with the rest of the plant at that time, it really made a lasting impression on me. And I still, for a couple of years afterwards, I still keep in touch with her on a basis. One of the role models that I had was actually a site vice president. So I was up at the senior level, and you kind of think, I'm going to call them men who turn turbines, right? You get this real kind of machoism going with nuclear power, and he's the leader of the power plant, and he was very caring. Made it so that, he would ask you how your family was. And if I mentioned, my daughter's coming to see me, well, why don't you leave? Don't hang around here. And, from him, I learned how to be a good, responsive to your staff, and how to be a leader and make it so that the people around you, like I would have done anything for him, because I knew he would always, say thank you, and why don't you do this? And I think you're doing great here. And that really had an impact. It really had an impactful effect on me, just because I saw somebody that was close to my style, and he was successful, right? So to me, that was very, very powerful.
Yeah, and interesting that at that point in your career, you'd had both male and female mentor leaders to help you see everything was possible.
Right, right.
Very
And, and another thing that women, especially in our industry, because it's so male, is you don't see other women, right? So that's why it's really important that we have these types of things online. WIN is very important. The women that Linda's organization, I wasn't aware of that, Linda, so I'm going to sign up. Yeah, so, try and, there's lots of resources available for people online and for people in the industry, and just try and find somebody whose style you appreciate, and yeah, it's very important.
Excellent, great answers, and thank you everybody for kind of being willing to really open up on these kinds of things. I think for people listening in, that's real value to get to hear so directly about your experiences. For people who are considering joining either the energy industry broadly or the power generation sector, I guess looking at this both because you're all active now, Stephanie, soon to be in associations that are promoting development of the industries, what advice would you give to people who are watching this thinking, okay, that's it, that's a cool industry, I want to be like these women, I want to get into this? Where should they start? What are the kinds of steps that they should take to be able to make some headway, to be able to evaluate whether this industry really is for them? And Lisa, perhaps I'll start with you.
Well, that seems like an easy question. I guess I would say, the nuclear industry, or the energy industry, the opportunities are endless. So I think the one thing that I would definitely want to impress upon people is that you can have a career in almost any stream in the energy sector. So I came in as a frontline nuclear security officer. I've moved around the organization. I'm doing things today that I never ever dreamed of. So I would say, you know, for somebody who's looking to get into this industry, I would say take a chance. You know, find your niche. What is it you can bring to the industry? The industry has jobs, you know, across the whole spectrum, right? So you don't need to be an energy expert. You don't need to be a nuclear expert. We provide that training and that information. So try something new. Build your network. Certainly, you know, feel free to connect with any one of us on LinkedIn, and we'll, you know, happily kind of talk you through, you know, what might be a good fit for you.
Excellent, great advice. And Stephanie?
Yeah, so, you know, like Lisa said, you know, reaching out and networking is important. So for example, the people that are on this call, you know, I hope we're giving you some good info. There's the organizations. You know, one thing to remember about the energy sector is we're going through change right now. You know, climate change has become a big, you know, is a big issue that we need to address. And so there's a lot of really exciting things that are happening. You know, electrification, electric cars, you know, small modular reactors, they are the future for, you know, nuclear power in the world. So there's a lot of really innovative sort of things. So, you know, people should be thinking about how, like Lisa said, how can I contribute? But reaching out and, you know, like Lisa said, I actually mentor women through LinkedIn, and I'm sure everybody here does as well, because you kind of always want to know what it's really like. So you know, just build your network, reach out. There's lots of conferences you can attend as a student or as an observer. And just, yeah, it's an exciting time to be in the energy sector.
Yeah, fascinating. And Linda, what advice would you give?
I echo the thoughts voiced by my fellow panelists. Again, I would encourage you to join Weekend. We have many programs throughout the year. We have tour facilities, and again, every event is sponsored and therefore free to the participant. We truly want to encourage women to join this sector. And so if I may share some reflections and learnings, and this three nuggets that I would like to share are basically universal. And so if you're considering this sector or any other sector, and I'm hoping these three things would help, and I call them the three C's. And the first C is really to confirm what your red line or your red lines or your bright lines are, i.e. moral compass, your integrity. Because if you can articulate and understand what lines you will not cross, it will serve you well. Because sometimes, you know, you'll encounter situations where you might have to make decisions in the moment. I know my fellow panelists said most times you don't, but in the legal sector sometimes you do, especially when you're in the C-suite. You have to make decisions promptly, and so if you have that moral compass, it will guide your decision. And so it's all about tone at the top. And the second one is carpe diem, and that is to seize the day. I would encourage, especially young women listening to this, is really to be a continuous learner. That is, try and read a book a month if you can, because leaders are readers. And so as you plan your career, also be ready to embrace opportunities that you did not expect. For example, I was offered a senior position in the automotive industry many, many years ago. I don't know anything about cars. I only know the color of cars, but I don't know the components. So I was afforded an opportunity and I seized it. Again, the same with the power utilities. I knew very little about it, but when the opportunity was presented to me, I embraced that opportunity and seized that. And the final point, the final C is to collaborate, to collaborate with others, to create super teams, as I mentioned, because collaboration really is the new competitive advantage. So take this time to retool or to upskill, as some people say, to learn about technology, innovation, and AI technology, smart technology. This sector is so exciting, oh, to be young again.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Those are great nuggets and so individual. It's nice to get such a broad range of advice. A question we've had from the audience. Take us through, and we don't have a ton of time on this, but take us through perhaps a career hurdle and how you were able to get over that hurdle. Coming from out of the blue, so we'll respect whatever you can come forward with, but a career hurdle and how you were able to jump over it and keep going on the sprint. Lisa, are you okay to start with that one?
Sure. I'll say okay. Well, on the fly, I would say the thing that comes to my mind the first is a barrier in the hurdle. Is actually myself, right? So the barriers that, the lack of confidence to raise your hand and say, I could do that, I could go out and do something different. Number of opportunities throughout my career where somebody called me up and said, oh, I have this job, I'd like you to come work for me. And, left to my own devices and my own interpretation of the job, I likely wouldn't have applied for those jobs, but for somebody else touching me on the shoulder and saying, hey, you could do that. Like you'd be good in this job. Come and work for me. And so I would say the biggest hurdle sometimes that we face, and this is sometimes very specific to women, is that confidence piece and not letting ourselves get in our own way. There's enough other challenges out there to not worry about tripping over your own feet. That would be my.
Yeah, stay out of your own way. Absolutely.
Yeah, my own quick answer there. Head up, eyes open.
Fantastic. And Linda, how about a hurdle that you got over without skinning your knees on the track?
Oh, again, that's a fantastic question. Again, to my earlier point, my first nugget, and that is, to understand what your red lines are, your integrity, your values, because if you know what they are, when you encounter that crisis, you will be able to make those decisions. So, I encountered the situation in the automotive sector during the economic crisis. The whole company almost went down, bankrupt because our suppliers couldn't pay. And so the crisis we had was we needed to make a decision then whether to supply to the to the automotive companies or not, because we were a component supplier. And again, I had to lead a team of executives to make the decision. And again, I think we women, and again, I was the only female executive. And this is one of the advantages of being a woman. We are great listeners, and we're very good at pulling together the team to arrive at a decision. So I was able to do that in one day. We only had one day to do that. So that was the first crisis that I encountered. Again, it is really important to be calm, and I tend to excel when there's a crisis. I tend to be my calmest when there's a crisis, and so there's this take charge attitude. And again, I encountered that many years later in another company when in one day we lost $500 million in market share. And again, we had to as part of the executive team, I had to lead the team. We had to figure out what to do, how to manage that crisis. So again, going back to, knowing what your values are and having all the skills and the calmness that you've gathered along the way is going to be useful.
Interesting. Yeah, some big moments in your career for sure. Stephanie, how about for you?
Yeah, so, I spoke a little bit earlier about how, the first time I went in the power plant, I saw the shift manager in the control room, and I said I wanted to do that, and I had applied early in my career and I was turned down, and I was said I needed some more supervisory experience to do that role. So I went and I got that. And then I had an opportunity to go on this program. And this program, just so everybody is aware, is 4 years in school with technical exams and long hours. And then you get that little ticky box, and then you're on shift. At the time this opportunity came up, I actually had a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old and a husband that worked full time. So, how are we going to manage all of this? How are we going to, me working shift and him working and 2 little kids and et cetera. So, we sat as a family and we had a discussion, and, we rearranged our life, and I was fortunate. My husband decided to quit his job and he stayed home with my children. I'm not suggesting that everybody has to do that, but that was what we decided to do as a family, because really, having a career, this meant a lot to me. And, I wanted to be a strong role model for my daughters, but I also wanted a good life for them. So, the message that I finally got through my head at that time was, women, you don't necessarily have to have it all at the same time, right? So, I got used to having a house that wasn't that clean to my standards, because, I'm used to some of my laundry was white and being turned pink, right? So there was a lot of check and adjust going on here. But we did manage to get through that. And, I like to think that, my 2 daughters who are in their 20s now, they got to see they have a strong role model as a mother. Sometimes they don't like the tone I talk to them in, because I talk like I'm running a power plant at them. But, it's, if I want to leave one message for everybody on this line, is you hear a lot about lean in and about, we can have it all. You can have it all, but you have to decide what that all is for you personally, right? You can't, let's be realistic. You can't have everything at the same time. You just have to decide in your own self, what am I happy with? How am I balancing my life? And once you come to that agreement, you're good.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, I have one question for you. I do have one more question for the panel, but I'm not sure how we are for time at your end.
I think we have time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, panelists. You've been terrific. Really, my last question, because we can't have a webinar during a pandemic without asking a pandemic question, because it is part of our everyday lives for this period of time. How do you see your leadership? Has it changed over this last few months of working from home, going back to the office, not going back to the office, different people moving through different ways? And I guess you can choose to answer it for your own personal style or activities and how that's changed, or how your own manager has managed you. Certainly open to either of those, because I think this really is on people's minds. And maybe Linda, if I could start with kind of your take on how this has changed over this time.
Well, things have changed. We're all, my team and I, we're all working from home, which is fantastic. And this has shown the organization that it is possible to do what we do from home. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is I find myself, in addition to my daytime job and the work that I'm doing with Women in Energy, I'm also spending a lot of time in my other volunteer role, and that is serving on the board of Food Banks Canada, focusing on dealing with food insecurity and helping to feed Canada. And in that role, we have raised over $200 million this year alone. So that makes my heart sing. And then the third thing I'm doing is trying to read more. Trying to read more and to learn more about innovations and technology. So those are the 3 things I'm doing.
Excellent. And Stephanie, for you, how have things kind of changed in the way that you're delivering your leadership?
Well, it's actually a very timely question for me, because I've actually just left Ontario Power Generation and I'm going to a new company. So I've actually only been with this company for 2 weeks. So I'm trying to meet all my new staff and figure out what they're doing, and, trying to do this all through this computer. So, as a leader, like, I'm going to be the president of this company, I'm still trying to think about how am I going to get everybody together, and, because collaboration is important, and I'm just trying to figure that out right now. And I think this pandemic has created, some opportunity for some changes. I think that, but at the same time, it makes the collaboration a little bit different. So I'm still kind of thinking about this. The one thing I will say is I am concerned about the effect of the pandemic on women in general, because, I've been dealing with, some of my peers when I was still with Ontario Power Generation, and we'll be on this computer, and they have their kids running around and they're trying to homeschool them. And I don't know how we're going to get through this, because I don't want to see women have to choose between being at home and being out in the workforce. So I think we as leaders in this industry, we need to recognize that, and we need to make sure that we don't leave the women behind because of the issues that are external to the workforce.
Yeah, fantastic answer, and I'm glad you raised that, because that's certainly something that's on people's minds. Lisa, how has your kind of leadership delivery changed, or what have you done to kind of modify how you communicate with your team or with your own director?
So I think I think my modification was more of some things, maybe less of others. And so, making sure that I'm a lot more compassionate to how people are managing the stress. People manage stress very differently. Their reaction to this situation in the very early days, I was very honest with my team. And we had very transparent conversations. Some days it felt like a really neat adventure where you're stuck in your home and it's like you're kind of camping out. And then there were, and then the next day it would feel very much like the end of the world was coming and you just didn't know what was around the corner. And so really recognizing that everybody manages stress differently, being incredibly compassionate for where people are at, and recognizing that everybody has a lot of demands on them, especially women, right? So my current team, all women, but all of a sudden the added stress and pressure and workload of trying to homeschool kids, trying to manage care for your elderly parents, right? But you have to acknowledge what people are going through, and you need to meet people where they're at. And if you can't do that, then you probably need to regroup on what your leadership approach is. But people are our most important asset, and as leaders, our job is to really be there for people and say, what can I do to help? How can I make this easier, better for you? And sometimes it's just a listening ear, especially through something like COVID that we hadn't experienced before. There were so many unknowns on that. And so I would say that was my general first foot out the door was these people, my team they're people first, and they have all kinds of added stress and pressure that's not work, and we need to really recognize that.
Yeah, excellent. I think as a wrap up, it's in our chat box, but also just for people who hadn't thought of asking it, but will 5 minutes after we're done. If I could just go through the three of you, and if you could offer either your website or if you've got a LinkedIn page, just a couple of places that people could go to find more information about the industry and about your associations, just so people can follow up. We've heard some amazing and fantastic information here, all from your individual perspectives, and fascinating to marry that with the associations that you work with and the services and information and resources that they're providing. And so, Stephanie, if I could start with you, if you want to just sort of talk about where people can go and read more about COG and what it does.
Yes, so we do have a website, so that is the CANDU Owners Group. So there's lots of information that's on the website, as well as I can be found on LinkedIn, Stephanie Smith, honestly, name like Smith, yes. You might have to scroll through a couple pages, but you will find me. Yes, so please, anybody that's interested, please reach out and I'll be glad to answer any questions individually.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And Linda, for your organizations.
Again, we do have a website. It's called Women in Energy Canada, WIECAN. Have a lot of information about upcoming programs, about a mentorship program and the like. And most certainly, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions or you'd like to connect. I welcome that.
Excellent. And Lisa.
Yes, so Women in Nuclear also has a webpage, womeninnuclear.org. We're going through a branding refresh exercise, so we'll be excited to share some upcoming events. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Lisa McBride, Women in Nuclear Canada. We have a lot of opportunities to share with you. I mentioned the mentor program coming end of the year. Our first Women in Leadership program being launched in September. Seats are still open, so anybody who's interested, send me a note on LinkedIn. I'm not as hard to find as Stephanie is. And if you have trouble finding Stephanie, send me a note and I'll connect you with Stephanie.
Be down.
Terrific. Well, Linda, Stephanie, and Lisa, I can't thank you enough. I know your time is precious, and for you to have given us all an hour to hear about your experience, about your style, about your aspirations for yourselves and the industry has just been really great. I got goosebumps at least 2 or 3 times, so I can't speak for the rest of the audience, but we really, really appreciate your willingness to do this and your openness to share these with us. So I'll turn it over to Nav and Alicia. Thanks very much for putting this together.
Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. And we're going to kick it off right away with some introductory remarks from Minister, the Honourable Jill Dunlop, Associate Minister of Children and Women's Issues, and also the Member of Provincial Parliament for Simcoe North. So over to you, Minister.
Great, thank you, Jane. Central to my work every day and a personal passion of mine, and that's promoting women's economic security and empowerment. Ontario's nuclear power industry is one of our province's great economic strengths, and it also has a reputation as a sector where women can build rewarding and exciting careers. So the topic of economic empowerment is a natural fit for this sector. We are faced with the challenge of attracting more girls and women into sectors like science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as the skilled trades. Our economic prosperity depends on our success in this area. What is incredible is that modern radiology was discovered by one of the greatest scientists of all time, Madame Marie Curie. It was her daughter Irene who then discovered induced radioactivity, which allowed for nuclear energy. Those are 2 incredible women to look up to in your industry, and we want to have even more. I have been actively working with many of my colleagues, including the Ministry of Labour Training and Skills Development and the Minister of Education, to use the primary and secondary school systems to broaden girls' career interest at critical points in their education journey. Encouraging girls to see themselves in these incredible careers needs to start early in schools, highlighting the opportunities, building the skills that are needed, and showcasing the incredible women who are blazing the path for our future. I learned early in life to value non-traditional careers for women. Growing up around my family's plumbing and heating supply business, I had the opportunity to peek into the male-dominated world of the skilled trades. From those days, I always felt women can do anything they set their minds to, and we must encourage others in these endeavors. Our government wants to support women with high-paying jobs and satisfying careers in both the skilled trades and STEM sectors. Ontario, as you know, faces a looming shortage of workers in the trades. These workers who came into the sector in the 70s and 80s are heading off to well-earned retirements. And with this shortage also brings opportunity. And there is no better time than right now for girls and women to join the trades. Our government is working hard to encourage more individuals, including women and girls, to get into the skilled trades and have a long and fulfilling career that is flexible and pays well. This means raising awareness of the benefits of the skilled trades and teaching kids at a young age about the many opportunities that are available. Another sector that is filled with opportunities is the STEM and the energy sector. Today in Canada, women comprise less than a quarter of those employed in the STEM occupations and less than 20% of the nuclear sector's workforce. Ontario's innovative and knowledge-based energy sector offers a natural career path for many STEM graduates. We need to make sure girls and young women are encouraged in these educational fields so that they are not shut off from these great opportunities in the future. And looking at the figures, we have some work to do in this area. Only 1 in 3 students enrolled in STEM disciplines are female, Comparatively, female students make up more than half of the enrollment in non-STEM disciplines in Ontario. Our government is committed to preparing Ontario students for success by equipping them with the skills they need in science, technology, engineering, and math. I am proud that the Minister of Education, Minister Lecce, is currently developing Ontario's kindergarten to grade 12 STEM education strategy. And that curriculum will have a focus on keeping STEM pathways open from an early age. I'm also proud to work with my other colleagues, like the Minister of Colleges and Universities and the Minister responsible for energy, to encourage more people to enter such a meaningful field when they reach post-secondary and beyond. I always say you can't convince a 17-year-old girl that she's going to want to be a plumber or electrician. We need to start earlier in life. The world is changing, and both skilled trades and STEM need to become more gender balanced if Ontario is going to prosper. And I'd like to hear your ideas this morning about ensuring that more women have access to great careers that are offered by our world-class energy sector. So thank you very much for having me today.
Well, thank you, Minister Dunlop, for those opening remarks and certainly for your ongoing support. We know it's so important that we contribute to, or we continue to advocate and push for a more diverse representation, especially with STEM and the skilled trades. So before we get into some of the Q&A, I'm just going to take a moment to introduce myself as well. So again, my name is Jane Travers, and I am the Vice President of Asset Management and Optimization, and I work in OPG's Renewable Generation line of business. I graduated from mechanical engineering, and I will say in 1987, so yes, a long time ago. And since then, I've been working in the energy sector, and that's over 30 years. And 20 of that has been in the nuclear side of the business, and the last 10 in renewable generation. So currently, I'm responsible for the optimization of our renewable generation fleet. It's comprised of 66 hydroelectric generating stations, 2 thermal stations, and a new solar farm. And my team is transforming a 100-year-old business through the implementation of innovative solutions. And we're connecting the workforce from every part of the province with technology to ensure that they have information at their fingertips. Oh, I just had a note. Someone cannot hear me. Are you able to hear me okay?
I can.
Yep, great. Okay. So yeah, we want people to have information at their fingertips, and my team is working on that on the renewable generation side for OPG. The key is that this includes our skilled trades, and they play a key role, of course, in the maintenance and operation of our fleet, and they need to have the appropriate technology to enhance their work experience and also to increase their access to information. And one of the interesting things, just from what you had been talking about, Minister Dunlop, about getting to girls earlier when they're thinking about, their choices in grade school and high school. OPG has sponsored a Women in Science conference out in Eastern Ontario, actually in the Cornwall area, and it has brought women who have trades, engineering, technology, science, and brought in students from many different high schools within the local region to hear about career paths and encourage them to stay and continue with the sciences to make sure that they keep their options open. So it's been an interesting and exciting way to get to girls as they're starting to think about all the different possibilities in their post-secondary education plans. The other, I've been in the last 6 months, of course, I've been actively involved with the COVID-19 response for OPG on crisis management team and on the recovery team. So it's a perfect segue. Let's begin our chat. So Minister Dunlop, there is a lot happening in the province to help spur economic recovery and also prepare for a possible second wave. And we'd like to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. So it seems timely as well to have you here, as you have been vocal supporter not only of women of the workforce, but specifically in skilled trades. So can you tell us about why you have taken on this specific mantle?
Great, thanks, Jane. And I was referring to you when I mentioned people in the 70s and 80s who should be retiring, who are retiring. Sounds like you're quite busy and very involved, so that's amazing.
Yeah.
So last year I was appointed to this position, Minister of Women and Children's Issues, and that was actually one of the things on my mandate was increasing the number of women in trades. And it's kind of interesting looking back at my family background. My family owned a plumbing business, so my dad was a plumber who turned politician, who, when he retired a couple of years ago, went back to plumbing. So it's definitely in his genes. My brother's also a heavy equipment operator. But looking at the family business and the number of skilled trade workers who worked in the business, who lived in the community and supported their families too. It was such a great opportunity. And I look back and I guess I was that 17-year-old girl who my dad was encouraging me to be an engineer at the time, not with a family business, but to go into engineering, which I did that for a year and realized that physics in university wasn't the same as it was in high school. So my regrets there. But this has taken me into a non-traditional type female career as well. But so it was something on my mandate letter, and I had been working in the year prior into working with trades and some of the work that was being done with the College of Trades and changing the apprenticeship ratios and whatnot. So it was a kind of a natural pathway then to not only encouraging everyone to trades, but how do we encourage more women into trades? And when I had the opportunity to travel the province and look at some of the great programs that are happening, we see that women only represent about 4.5% of skilled trade workers in Ontario. But yet we know now and in the coming years, we're projecting 250, 300,000 jobs. And if we have lots of jobs and an underrepresentation of women, what a better fit. We should be connecting women to these opportunities. And, I look at some of the programs that we're running for low-income women, and, rather than seeing women in low-paying or minimum wage-paying retail-type jobs, we can get women into real viable career opportunities that give them so many more options even within that profession too. So I think that is so key. And so that has been a big piece of my portfolio this year, but also something that I am truly interested in. And I want to see more women. And I had the opportunity recently to attend a graduation with Leuna in Vaughan, and this was a specific program for women in construction. And I was talking with one of the young ladies who was graduating, and she was actually going up to Bruce Power to work. And I was asking her if she was from the area, and she said, no, I just wanted a change in life. I wanted a different path. I wanted out of the city. So here she is moving to beautiful Kincardine to start a new career in construction. I couldn't have been more proud of her.
It's great to hear that, and I enjoyed actually hearing about your relationship with your father and his role, because we often do hear that girls they are impacted by what how they are with their father, and are they helping them fix things around the house, and that hands-on, because the trades do have a lot to do with that. And we don't often, even when I think about coming through high school, and I'm dating myself, but home ec and shop, and the girls all did home ec and the guys all did shop. But I wonder too, if I had thought about or had access into, the shop and the tools and things like that, whether it would have made a difference for me as well. So that's interesting. And does the data suggest a shortage in employable skilled trades persons? I guess, the government, you've talked about it a bit, but they must be planning or currently offering to help young people, specifically women, and getting them to think about the trades as a post-secondary option.
Well, we definitely know there's a shortage in Ontario and across Canada as well. And I mentioned about 4.5% skilled trade workers are women. There's such an opportunity to get women into those careers too. And the Minister of Labour Training and Skills Development, they recently had their campaign that they put out, A Career You Wouldn't Trade. I think that's amazing. And even working with organizations like Job Talks and Rescon Construction, the work that they're doing. And I was excited. I was number 50 of 50 videos that they were doing about construction, and these were 1-minute segments where you'd have a skilled trade worker talking about their career, what they enjoyed about it, how they got into it. So I got to kind of from the perspective of we should be really encouraging young people, and so it's great to see that you have governments talking and the private sector as well, that we're trying to reduce the stigma around trades. And I think when you look at the influencers in a young person's life, guidance counselors and their parents, it's so important that we're changing that stigma, that people realize these are fantastic careers, they're well-paid jobs, and there's such a demand. And looking at what we've been through in the last couple of months with COVID, seeing that these are also essential workers. These are the people who kept things going in crucial times, I think is also really important. So we need to, to look up and respect those people for the work that they're doing. I think they're, like the nuclear sector, it's so important, but the people who are building this province and this country, they're building the roads and the bridges, the hospitals, the schools, keeping the lights on for everyone. These are so important and essential. So I think they deserve the utmost respect.
Well, that sounds great. And just off of one of the other comments that you made, there was Alicia has put forward a question. What strategies, is there anything that the government is doing to keep math and science fun? I know that I have 2 daughters, no sons, but it was a shocker to me that after grade 10, they felt that was it for science. So, whether it had to do with the style of education or the content or what have you, but what is it doing to, are you aware of this?
So I have 3 daughters. So my youngest is just starting her first year university. But I think it's so important that we're looking at this as early as kindergarten now. So obviously a little different than what it has been for my daughters and your daughters as well. These things, weren't were introduced later on, or maybe weren't as fun at the time. But I look at the incredible technology that we have now and the opportunities. I'm sure it's much more fun than it was for me at that time as well. But introducing these things at a younger age, I think is so important, that then there'll be a time down the road where we're not looking at 4.5% of skilled trade workers or 20% in STEM, but women are just part of that pool because they've grown up with this being something that is an opportunity for them. And I know I was at a Women in Trades roundtable last year, and I was speaking with a representative from Hydro One who was saying they had done a study with Waterloo University, and they were looking at young women and the ages that if you hadn't introduced a young woman to STEM and skilled trades by the age of grade 3, that they weren't going to be interested. So we really need to be concentrating on earlier ages, and I think taking advantage of the amazing technology that we have and that will continue to come moving forward, because that will be key.
Okay, thank you. I just want to double check, because I know that I some of that I didn't catch all of it. I'm not sure if everybody else did. So we'll just making sure that those who are listening in are aware that may be not just me, it may be others as well. Maybe we'll just move over back into women, especially for the women who are part of the conference and the workshop today. What advice would you give them who are considering a skilled trade?
There's so much opportunity out there. I think is really important to know that, and I love talking to young people about it as well, who are looking at career opportunities. That make sure keep your eyes open to this, and there's lots of resources out there that you can see firsthand what different trades look like, whether it's an electrician, a plumber, a mason, but so many opportunities and resources there. I think is really key. I had the opportunity to speak at the Skills Ontario virtual conference this year, and they did a specific women's forum. So we had young high school students who were on the call, and I think it's important to know that there are mentors out there. And I think as women, we really need to stick together, to work together, and to really be there encouraging one another. And that was something that I saw on this call, was women from different sectors talking about, the work that they had done and how they came together. And it was all about mentorship. And not just one-on-one mentorship, but the different associations and that within themselves. And, I mentioned when I was with Leuna the other day, they have a women's group as well. So I think it's quite key that you connect with those associations and mentorship opportunities to, to give you that support as you work your way through it.
Yes, I think what we're finding today, and just listening, there was a previous part of this She Leads, and it was women talking about the importance of networking. So I'm glad that you did mention that. And there has been another question actually from the audience. It says, is it possible for someone who, build a career in the nuclear industry, especially when they come from an oil and gas background, an immigrant, no nuclear experience? It feels like there's a lot of opportunity for younger people, but what about the ones who are maybe looking at a career change?
Oh, I would definitely encourage women to look at this as a second career opportunity. I'm not sure of the transition between the two areas, but I'm sure that the resources are there to help support that. And with the shortage of workers in general, but knowing there's a shortage of women as well, what a great opportunity to switch into a career opportunity that's out there. And I would think that I would recommend it to any woman. And I have seen lots of women who are looking at trades as a second career too, that, maybe they've raised their children now and they want something different. But it's a career opportunity, whether you're leaving high school or looking at it as a second career option. I think it would be a fantastic choice for any woman.
That's great. We have time just for one more question. So I'll just give you a bit of background. There's an interesting comment that came out of a report on women in construction, and it was filed with the Quebec Parliamentary Commission on Gender Equality in 2011. And it said that it found 20% of women are stronger than 50% of men. So how can we as a sector combat the perceived gap between genders, especially in the trades?
Oh, that's a good question. I think women are still trailblazing the way into to skilled trades, and I think, as I mentioned, the mentorship part is so important. And I was actually had the opportunity this morning. I was speaking at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. We had a women's networking session there as well. So, women politicians who are also in what are still tend to be male-dominated careers, and we spoke about that coming together is so important, and having the conversations, whether it's with a mentor or amongst an association too. I think, but we're still trailblazing the way, and we need to be those women who stand up and support one another to continue to move forward and decrease that number. And as I said, mentioning or starting earlier on in education, I hope that we look forward in 10 years, 20 years, and we see that number of women increasing, that it's not just 4.5%, that it's 15, it's 20, it's 50% someday. But I think we can do that, and we as women support each other, and we are strong, and when we stick together, we're even stronger.
Oh, that sounds great. And there was just one other item that came in on the chat, and it kind of goes to what you were just talking about. Once women are into their roles in the trades, and there's not many of them, and they certainly would likely experience some barriers or challenges. I mean, it would be normal. But are you aware of anything that the ministry is looking at from that perspective? And that would be men and women working together, and a lot of men, very few women, and certainly in a male-dominated role.
Well, when I was just mentioning the call I was on earlier, we had some men join the call, and I gave them a shout out too, because I think it's so important that it's easy to be amazing, wonderful women when we have that support behind us, whether that's with our male colleagues or our partners, et cetera. I think it's to have that support behind us is important. And as our male colleagues, you know, we need them to support women in moving forward. And I think that's so important that, you know, they're supporting us, supporting each other as well. But we can continue to move that dial forward. And I think it's important that it's, you know, it's I think a change in mindset as well too. And when I mentioned, you know, parents and guidance counselors, you know, we need to change that thought as well, that these are viable, fantastic careers for any young woman. And just because it hasn't always been that way doesn't mean that it's not a great opportunity for a woman to be in that position. So I think, you know, we need to change the stigma, and it's government working together with the private sector as well, and standing up and saying, you know, here's a real opportunity for young people for second career to have a fantastic career that has so many opportunities that, you know, I would love to encourage my daughters as well. They didn't choose a career path, but maybe I should have started younger as well. But they see me, you know, monkeying around in the garage building stuff. So I have learned a little bit from family, but I think it's a great career, and I would encourage anyone to enter the trades.
That's great. Well, we're running out of time. So first of all, thank you for those who are participating today and have provided a few additional questions. And thank you, Minister Dunlop, for your insights, and also for taking some of those questions as well. We know that the nuclear sector will continue to support many clean energy careers and skilled trades, and the demand is growing to fill these roles. So we do need to find the ways to network and increase the number of women who are going to participate. The industry will certainly always have a need for engineers, skilled trades, and candidates with leadership, collaboration, creativity, and a safety mindset. And we should note that in 2019, OPG hired more than 400 students, 113 of them engineering interns, and in nuclear alone we'll be consistently needing over 2,000 construction trades from our vendor partners between 2020 and 2024 to support our large refurbishment projects, our nuclear outages, inspection work, and certainly our work in the waste management field. We're looking to create a more diverse and inclusive workforce. That's certainly one of the main things that OPG is interested in, and our employee base needs to be reflective of this diverse population that we serve. We need more young people to fill these high quality jobs, and it actually starts with making them aware of opportunities and getting them excited about the industry. So we've talked about the nuclear industry from more the generation and refurbishment part, but in fact there was a recent announcement. OPG launched the Centre for Canadian Nuclear Sustainability in Pickering, and it's a world-class facility that will attract skilled jobs, innovative businesses, and economic development into the Durham region. So I would like to introduce Lindsay Tilley, and she's the communication leads for the CCNS. And Lindsay, we would love to hear about the roles of the CCNS and what kind of opportunities could be available as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Honourable Minister Jill Dunlop and Jane and all the other women so far in this conference. Your words have been very inspiring to myself as a young woman in the industry. I am very excited to be here today to talk about our newly launched Centre for Canadian Nuclear Sustainability. For me, so far, it's been the highlight of my career to be able to be part of such an exciting initiative that we're launching, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to work on it. So I'll just give you a bit of background. The Centre was just announced by OPG recently as an innovation hub that will integrate collaboration and research to identify innovation solutions in the nuclear sector, while also supporting work underway for preparing for decommissioning of Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. So with participation from the wider industry, the Centre is going to operate as a hub that will leverage and coordinate Ontario's talents, advance solutions for nuclear materials with a continuing emphasis on minimizing our environmental footprint, creating economic growth in Ontario, mobilizing Ontario's strong nuclear supply chain, and really collaborating by forming partnerships with the industry, community, local businesses, academia, different communities and global entities to discover research and development opportunities for innovation in the nuclear sector. So as part of our mandate, we are looking at various opportunities for projects that will encourage participation in skilled trades. As an industry, we want to make sure that we have the capability for the future work. So there's a lot of work underway right now in nuclear, as you've mentioned, with refurbishments and other projects. And in parallel, OPG is planning for the decommissioning of Pickering, which will also bring further opportunity. But right now, in the meantime, we're looking at launching various programs and projects that will enhance the operating experience, help build training, and further develop those skill sets for those in the trades. We're still in the preliminary phase of building this center, and currently we're working on outreach for partnerships and planning of the actual physical space that we intend to have opening in the fall. This space will allow for these different groups to come and collaborate and work on innovation for the nuclear industry, and as well act as a community space where the public can actually come in and access kind of like an info center where they can get more information and learn more about what we're doing and maybe how they can get involved. So we're really excited for the work that's going to come from this center, and really looking forward to help completing the clean energy life cycle by providing sustainable solutions for the environment, the economy, and the industry and the community. So thank you, and we look forward to announcing future opportunities coming from this center.
I know it's the last session of the day, so hopefully many of you already know, but there are many different business areas within the nuclear sector, from communications to regulatory affairs and HR, but there's also law. And our objective for this conference is to bring awareness of all the opportunities available within the industry. And I think nuclear law isn't something that typically comes to mind when we think about energy. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to learn a little bit more about this business area, what paths are taken to get into nuclear law, but also get some career advice and guidance from the executives working in the field. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone, just again, if you do have any questions, please do submit them in the Q&A function. I'll try and get through all of them. Now let's get into it. So today I have with me Shelley, Magda, and Laura, three extraordinary women at different stages of their nuclear law careers. Ladies, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. Why don't we start with introducing ourselves? How about we start with you, Laura?
My name's Laura Van Soelen. I'm a partner at a law firm. It's actually a global law firm now, but I work out of the office in Toronto. It's called Gowling WLG. I am a partner in our nuclear law group. So I do a lot of really three kinds of things in the nuclear sector. One would be work on commercial deals, supply arrangements, perhaps M&A transactions, joint venture transactions. Second area would be on regulatory work, engaging with the nuclear regulator in Canada, the CNSC, Canadian Nuclear, Nuclear Sciences Commission?
Safety Commission.
Safety Commission. I am so sorry, everyone. I'm used to using the acronym. Just had a bit of a blank this afternoon. And the third area would be disputes in the nuclear sector, which has been an interesting area of my career. And that's actually how I first learned about nuclear law, which is a topic we'll probably get into later. I've been working in this sector now for 10 years. And the one thing that's amazing is it's a great career for anyone who likes to learn, because there is always something new going on in nuclear law. So it's been 10 years of continuous learning and a lot of fun. So that's me.
Awesome. Shelley, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Alexandria. So I'm Shelley Babin. I am the Senior Vice President, Law General Counsel, and I'm also the Chief Ethics Officer at OPG. So Alexandria and I are both actually in our head office downtown. You can sort of see we have similar backgrounds, but we're in different meeting rooms to make sure that we're practicing good physical distancing. So my career path, I actually started out also at a big downtown Toronto law firm, a national firm. Similar to Laura, my practice was in the dispute space and the litigation space. I spent about 10 years doing that. And I found that it was exciting work, it was interesting work, it was challenging, and there were always new issues to dive into. But I also found it challenging to balance my young family. I was working on a lot of what are called injunctions, which basically mean you've got an emergency appearance in front of a judge that is either tomorrow morning or the morning after, which means you've got to spend the rest of today and tonight and possibly the next 24 hours of your life in the office, which wasn't really conducive to having a great balance. So I started looking around for what else could be out there for me in the legal space with a litigation background. And I found that OPG was looking for a litigation lawyer. I knew nothing of energy, the energy industry, energy law, but I had a great discussion with the then general counsel about his philosophy for running a legal department, which is effectively the lawyers are the business, are the partners to the business, the strategic advisors to the business, helping them identify risk and manage risk. And that it wasn't really about sort of functionally understanding, having a deep understanding of nuclear law or energy law. It was more about understanding the business's needs and putting your legal skills to good use. So I came on board 5 years ago. Over the last 5 years, I've had opportunities to take on successive leadership roles. So now I lead the legal department, the corporate secretary team, and also really, I think really interesting and very topical these days, I have the ethics and equity teams, which focus on our code of business conduct and our equity, diversity, and inclusion programs. So that's a little bit about me.
Nice. And last but not least, we have Magda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hanebach. I hope you can all hear me now. I've unmuted myself. I work with Laura at Gowling WLG in the nuclear group, and I think Laura gave a nice summary of what our group does, and we do a lot of work both domestically and internationally, all across the nuclear sector for clients across the supply chain. And I've been lucky to basically start my career in nuclear law and continue it for the past, 8 years. Wow, time flies. So I'm really happy to be here and speaking with you, and that's about it.
Nice. Well, thank you, ladies. So I know for myself, seeing law on the agenda, I was a little bit confused. I guess coming from a communications background and a PR background. So if one of you, maybe I'll give this one over to Shelley. What does law have to do with energy? What do you ladies do? What is nuclear law? And maybe if we can dive into some of the opportunities that are available for women out there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a good question because I think Laura and Magda are definitely nuclear lawyers, and I definitely am not. And so
I gave this question to the right person.
Yeah, you should definitely ask them to follow up on this too. But I will tell you why I think that I'm not. And in fact, I have OPG has quite a big legal team. We have 20 lawyers on our team, and I would say that not one of them would identify themselves as a nuclear lawyer. And I think part of that is because the practice of law in a large organization like OPG, which of course doesn't just have a nuclear business, but we also have a renewables business. We do acquisitions. We have a lot of employees. We have unionized employees. So we have labor and employment considerations. So when you're talking about a big business with a complex sort of operating environment, lawyers need to come in with sort of a baseline skill set that we refer to as the table stakes. So you've got your legal education and you've got some training out there in the market somewhere that's helped you develop some acumen when it comes to legal skills. And then you're able to apply those skills sort of where you need them as the business. We've got, my expectation when we bring people into the department is that they've got sort of mental agility and intellectual curiosity and a willingness to partner with the business and really understand what they need. And then they're gonna lean on their legal background and skill set to bring that forward. So in the nuclear space, for example, as Laura was talking about, you've got to have some legal commercial background. You need to understand how partnerships work and intellectual property and things like that. But when you really need to understand sort of the complex issues around licensing or around construction, then that is when I, anyway, would turn to Laura and Magda, who are the partners that we use outside of the organization to say, okay, you've built nuclear facilities in Abu Dhabi, or what have you. Tell me, what are the issues that I should be aware of? What does your expertise tell you about how we should be getting into a negotiation with this particular partner? So I don't know, Alexandria, if that's a great answer for you, but I would say that nuclear law it is, you could call anything, energy law, hydro law, all of it. It really just is, what it is having a particular toolkit that you can apply to any industry. And I think any of the lawyers from my team could be successful in any industry that they went to outside of energy, notwithstanding that they've had this sort of immersive experience at OPG and nuclear and in energy law.
So, okay, that's a great answer. I'm going to let Magda and Laura add on to that question. But so, Shelley, do you need to have, do you have to go to law school to work at OPG in the law department?
Yeah, so certainly we have lawyers in the department, all of whom have been to law school. Some of them have gone to law school outside of Canada. We have some American trained lawyers, but all have a legal education, and they are called to the bar in Ontario. So they've passed their licensing requirements in Ontario. We also have other professionals in the group. So we have some administrative assistants who also provide sort of law clerking support, which does not require legal training. And then we also have a number of people who support our Code of Business Conduct program, which is really focused on human rights and harassment, sort of Code of Business Conduct type ethics issues. And while having a legal background is helpful, it's actually not necessary. You just have to have a sort of a solid understanding of our sort of requirements as an organization in order to be able to disposition that work. And then we have a group that supports the board of directors, so our corporate secretary function. And those folks our corporate secretary is a former lawyer, although you don't have to be a lawyer to be a corporate secretary. And then his group is mostly comprised of law clerks.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Sorry, we're dumbing it down for me. As again, I know nothing. But it's good to know that there's a lot of opportunities that women could be considering in the nuclear law or law in general. Magda and Laura, do you have anything to add on to that, or did Shelley cover all the opportunities in the job description?
Laura, do you want to jump in on that one?
Sure.
I think Shelley covered it quite adequately. Again, she is working at OPG, so she's looking at it from the organization of a business, whereas Laura and I are both from a law firm, so we do specialize a bit more into the niche fields. But essentially, we have the same. We have lawyers who are qualified to practice law in Ontario. We have administrative assistants. We have law clerks. And just in the firm in general, we have opportunities for a variety of people outside of nuclear law specifically. I don't know, Laura?
Mm-hmm. I would say that our nuclear group and our energy group, in addition to the other groups within our firm, are all supported by a business development person. So there would certainly be opportunities for people who may have a background in energy in some way, shape, or form. That background could be very helpful and could be leveraged to take on a position as a business analyst or a business development specialist assisting an energy group or a nuclear group in a law firm in Canada. Just by the by, there are not that many nuclear law groups in Canada. So if you do manage to secure one of those positions, that's fantastic. And it would be a pleasure to have you aboard, and no doubt we will encounter each other even if you're not at my firm. The only other thing that I would say, I suppose, is that there will be a host of other business functions as well that would support the nuclear group in a firm such as ours. And that would include anything from your kind of regular accounting functions to your kind of trend analysis, business trend analysis functions. All of those kinds of things are available as well, in addition to the strictly kind of legal career paths.
Nice. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to another question that we have. Throughout your careers, I know you guys are a little bit more senior in your career, but if you can give maybe the audience some challenges that you ladies have faced throughout your careers, and maybe do you feel any of them are still relevant today in law? Magda, do you want to take that one?
Yes, sir. I can start, and I'm sure that Shelley and Laura will have potentially some additional stories because everyone will have faced different challenges. I actually went to law school in the U.S. and graduated law school in the midst of the 2008 financial crisis, which, you know, the economic kind of environment that occurred is somewhat similar, maybe a bit not nearly as impactful, but somewhat similar to what is happening now. So I got out of law school and I had to come to a decision and evaluate the risks and rewards and try to find a new path for myself, because it wasn't the straight to corporate law, working in New York, you know, working 24/7 kind of law that I would be able to do. And I thought about it, and I was a Canadian citizen, so I decided to come back to Canada and get my equivalency here while I waited to see how the economy would recover from the crisis. And when I got back here, I couldn't practice as a lawyer right away. You have to do something that's called an equivalency. So you have to wait a little while, take some exams so that they can take your degree and say that it's acceptable for you to practice law here. As I was doing that, I thought, well, I need to find a job that's at least in the legal field so that I can understand what I'm going into and start developing my skills, because in law school, you don't learn that many skills. You learn a way of thinking. So I started as a legal assistant. I took a legal assistant job at Heenan Blakey, which was a law firm in Canada, which comes to my second challenge. And I actually got assigned to the nuclear law group there, and they were working on a very large arbitration. And I just ended up working, you know, quite a bit with the lawyers in the nuclear law group and developing my skills in that area. And there was a lot of work to be done. So I was able to kind of open a door that led to me getting an articling position with the firm so that I could continue to assist on the file. And so I articled at Heenan Blakey and was hired back as a first-year associate, and then Heenan Blakey dissolved. So there was no longer a job for me at Heenan Blakey. I was sorry. I was lucky though, and I think a lot of when we deal with crisis like this, sometimes it all comes down to luck and perseverance, I think. And I was very lucky that I was able to transition to Gowling WLG, where I work now with other members of the nuclear group. But I think that facing those two challenges, I know that as they were occurring, there was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I didn't know what was going to happen next and how it would work and what doors were open and what doors were closed. And so I had to adapt. I took a position that some would say I was overqualified for, though I would say that legal assistants oftentimes know more than lawyers do. But I did that, and I put everything I had into it. And, you know, as it worked out, I was very lucky to become a part of the group. I think adaptability, perseverance are so important during this time, and it's not necessarily always easy to do with the stress that's coming and the anxiety that is coming during this time. So, but that would be my advice in terms of the challenges I faced.
That's great advice. I see Shelley's already unmuted, so I'm going to go on to her if you have anything to add on or your challenges that you faced throughout your career.
Yeah, I'm not taking any chances with the mute button. Yeah, I mean, I you know, what Magda is touching on, I think is really valid. I would say for me, I mean, certainly I've had challenges over my career with, you know, being a young mother in a male-dominated environment and feeling a little bit isolated, having people say things to me like women who are serious about their careers don't take mat leaves, or, you know, I was 8 months pregnant and a male partner who was quite agitated about something picked up his ceramic coffee mug full of coffee and threw it at the wall. You know, things like that, where I would say, you know, I felt like I needed to make some hard decisions for myself about what was right for me and for my family. But I actually think, honestly, and to Magda's point about perseverance, the hardest challenge that I have faced in my career is happening to me right now. It's this particular time in in the world and what we're facing, and the things that I'm trying to reconcile as far as the blend that we're now seeing with family and home life, and work, and the fact that it all sort of blurs together. There are no boundaries. You know, my kids are home, my husband is home, and so I think, and I think, you know, all of that has led me to realize that if I'm not honest with myself about what I need, and if I'm not honest with the people around me about what I need, I'm going to find myself in a crisis. I actually did find myself in a crisis about a month ago, where I had been trying to just make it look like I was doing it all and I was figuring it all out. And, you know, at the worst case, I was just having a good sense of humor about a hard day instead of being really honest about how hard this time has been for me and for my family. So I think what I've learned through this period is probably pretty relevant to any sort of stretch of time, but it's really brought some of those things to the surface for me.
Yeah, I think that's really, really relevant right now. Laura, I'll hand it over to you.
I think the biggest challenge for me, and this picks up a little bit on what Shelley said, has been acknowledging and accepting that it is okay to set boundaries, defining what those boundaries are for me, and then being consistent in applying them. Because law is one of those careers where sometimes there isn't an obvious answer. And you could spend all day, all night, all week, all year thinking about a particular problem and never put it down. And it would be interesting to a lot of people, including myself, for that entire time. But that kind of thing is obviously not conducive to having also a family at home and kids who want to see me, and, you know, I want to take them to swimming lessons and those kinds of things. So for me, the challenge was really trying to find my voice, recognizing that it is okay for me to say, this is what my boundary is. I am going to stop work between 5:00 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. at night, because that's the time that I have blocked off for my family, whatever it is, or the time I go to the gym, those kinds of things. And that's really important. And the other thing that I think is also has been a challenge for me is keeping healthy when there's this constant pressure to answer emails and always be on. But it's so important to make that time to go to the gym or participate in a group sport. I myself am part of a synchronized skating team. So there's 20 of us who skate on the ice at once, and we compete in 4 or 5 competitions throughout the year. It's not only a great way to exercise, but it's a great social outlet for me as well. And that was really something I was missing in my life. When I incorporated that back into my routine a few years ago, I'd say I became happier. I actually think I became more productive at work by doing that kind of thing.
I think that's a really good point that you touched on keeping your mental health and your physical health in check during these times. It's kind of crazy, and it's a good segue into the next topic. You know, as women, we tend to take on more responsibilities within our households, even, you know, in the most balanced homes. Work-life balance can sometimes seem impossible, and I think, you know, throughout the pandemic, COVID-19, you know, 2020 as a whole has really just amplified some of these stresses and anxieties. As women in your fields, can you maybe share some of the advice on how you guys manage the work-life balance, or is it a myth? Is there no such thing as work-life balance?
I mean, I could start on that. I think I touched on it a little bit in your last question, Alexandria. Like, I think it's not a balance, it's a blend. And it's sort of owning that blend. And I think the way that technology enables us to constantly be available in our work life, it also means that that's something we can use to our advantage in order to also always be connected in our home life. But I think you do have to say there isn't going to be, you have to acknowledge there isn't necessarily going to be a perfect balance. And if you're constantly striving for balance, you're going to constantly be disappointed. Right. But I think, I mean, for me, and I sort of touched on this, like, I needed to be honest with myself and with my boss about what I need. I needed to be honest with my husband about what I need. And I also find for me, and I keep relearning this over and over and over again throughout the course of my professional life, I also need to plan. I need to know what the next few weeks or months are going to look like in my life. And I find right now, because there's so much uncertainty, you know, my kid, are they going back to school? Are they not going back to school? What are we doing? What are we, you know, what are the risks? All of that has made it very hard. but I have actually sat down just in the last few days and made a list of here are the things that I know that I'm going to need to do in my personal life to get my kids ready to be back to school. And these are the things that, yeah, I maybe need to delegate some of those things to my husband or to other family members who can help me out. But that enables me to be more focused and more present in my work, as opposed to constantly thinking about that running list that I need to get to. I've actually written it down, and just the act of doing that I find very helpful. And the other thing is, and Laura, you talked about this with your skating, like if I don't have an outlet, then I'm also not very focused. And so we just finished a week of board meetings, and I've now got a couple weeks before my kids are going back to school. This is the sweet spot for me to actually take some time off and spend some time with them. That's going to be focused time dedicated to them, that I actually think is going to be better for me when I come back to work, because I will be refreshed, recharged, refocused, reconnected with them. And I think will make me more effective, more productive, more engaged with my team, more engaged with the work. Those would be my suggestions.
That's awesome. Magda, do you have anything to add in?
Yeah, so I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective because I don't have a family. So it's really all about me, which can be a positive and a negative, because I think that it's even easier to just get wrapped up in work 24/7 because there isn't anyone you're necessarily quarantined with that you know that kind of tries to engage with you. So it's very easy to get wrapped up in 24/7 work and not think about stepping away and refreshing yourself. Like Shelley said, I think that it's so easy during this time to get wrapped up in what's happening and focus on work. And it's hard to disconnect because you are quarantined in your home, and you know your computer is there with you, and it's very easy to constantly be checking what's happening. And I think if you take that step and not disconnect, it's very easy to burn out quickly, and you won't even realize you're burning out until you hit a point where you can't even imagine going back to the computer. And so I think it's so important, even from that end, to just step away, make sure you set, as Laura had previously said, boundaries around the time. So yes, there will be emergencies where you might have to be on longer, but to try to step away, not check the computer for a few hours, breathe, try to have social interactions, or at least go for a walk. Ensure you're taking care of your physical and mental health. And I just found it really hard in the beginning, where I really was 24/7. And there came a point where I just did not even want to get out of bed to look at the computer. And I had to just take a day to breathe, refresh myself, and go back. And I think it can be hard to do that sometimes. That would be my input, is just to make sure you're consistently checking with yourself and knowing that, you know, you have time to breathe and you're allowed time to breathe. And it may feel like you should be available 24/7. You don't have to be, and no one expects you to be except yourself.
Yeah, I think I can definitely relate to that as well. I find that I'm definitely working longer hours throughout the pandemic. The time almost runs away from you, and you're like, oh, wow, it's 7 o'clock and I'm still on the computer. Definitely need to find that. It's hard to find that balance, but you got to make it a priority. We're not curing cancer here, right? But Laura, I'll give it over to you.
The only thing I would add to what Shelley and Magda have already said is I have found through this time over the last few months, I needed to find a way that felt right for me to be mindful about what it is that I want to do in a given day. You know, maybe part of my brain is telling me you should do everything that's on your to-do list in a given day, but most days that's completely unrealistic. So I have started spending 10 minutes in the morning, not meditating because I like the idea of meditating, but it's never felt comfortable for me. But I do kind of get quiet with myself as I'm having a coffee, and I set my intentions for the day. And my intentions might just be, I'm going to move more today than I did yesterday. Or, you know, that paper I've been putting off, I'm going to come up with 3 solid ideas for that paper. So I'm no longer, expecting I'm going to get that entire paper done and I'm going to run a marathon today. It's really just something that's achievable that I've set as my intention at the outset of the day. And then when it comes to the end of the day, I can feel good if I've achieved those things, but I've made them kind of more manageable for myself. And that's been a new practice for me, and one that I have found very, very beneficial in getting through this time.
I love that. That's awesome advice. Let's move on. So we have a lot of people that are probably looking for a new career that are tuned in. Staying on the topic of the pandemic, I think it could be hard for us to adjust to the virtual world. Any advice for newcomers on how to network and interacting with others without that in-person connection? And maybe we can touch on some of your thoughts on staying effective virtually. Laura.
Sure.
You looked ready.
We made eye contact.
I'm going to pick up on the theme of intentionality. I think, staying connected in this time requires us to be that much more intentional than we might otherwise be. Law firms typically employ new summer students every summer. These are law students who are in their second year of school who want to come and have an experience of what it's like to be a lawyer, and they would then generally come back and article with our firm, and some of them then become lawyers there. Many of these law students, well, all of these law students started this summer in the time of COVID, so none of us were in the office. We were all working from home. And so there was a great challenge in terms of meeting some of the lawyers that they would work with, because typically we'd have a bunch of social events where we could all get together and mingle and those kinds of things. And I found, the strategies that some of the students adopted were really, really helpful. So some of them just created a list of all of the lawyers who had practices that were interesting to them. And they would send an email saying, hey, I'm new here. I would love to meet you. Can we meet for a 10-minute Zoom meeting? And I know all of us were really, really happy to meet those students at those times. But what I would say is they just kind of got intentional about what it is that they wanted, the experiences they wanted to have, and they kind of sought those out. The other piece of advice I guess I would have is I think this is a great time to experiment and try new things that you wouldn't normally do. I started attending all of these webinars put on by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which I had never done before in my regular day-to-day life. I have A, learned a ton, B, I've met a bunch of new people. My LinkedIn just kind of exploded. And I have all of these new sounding boards for certain issues that and they're all people that I've met through these kind of networking conferences. So I think finding opportunities, being open to opportunities that are outside of your comfort zone, like for me, this IAEA thing, and then being intentional about setting time to meet with people who are important for you to meet with, maybe mentors or those you want to learn from.
Okay, I should have made you go last. That's a good segue into our next question, but I'm going to let Shelley and Magda touch on the virtual effectiveness and staying remote.
Yeah, I would say this is such an unusual time, and I think it's hard when you're trying to get to know an organization or you're trying to network with people to get into an organization when there's a bit of, I think, virtual fatigue right now, where people are spending so much of their days on video calls that they don't have a lot of discretionary time. And when they have it, they don't necessarily want to spend it on yet another Zoom call. So I would say, I mean, certainly where people are willing, I absolutely agree with Laura that you make your list of the people that you want to connect with and get out there and ask them. I think people always want to talk about themselves. So if you introduce to them an opportunity to talk about themselves, like Laura and Magda and I got to do today, then the people will want to do that. But I think it's also offering people a choice. Like, it doesn't always have to be a video. Do you have time for a 10-minute phone call? I think also people would appreciate, and I think too, we've sort of entered this era of asking people how they're doing. At least I do that often with my team at the beginning of every call that I have with my team, or even, if I get on the phone with Laura or Magda, we spend the first 10 minutes sort of catching up. I think acknowledging that everybody's got a lot on their plates right now. People have their own personal circumstances, and just sort of saying like, how are you holding up? Right. Or like, just to kind of humanize that contact a little bit, that if you're face to face, that just sort of happens by virtue of the fact that you're face to face. When you're on the phone, I think it's harder to build that rapport. You have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, I agree. Magda, I'm gonna give you the last touch point on this.
So I'll echo both Shelley and Laura on what they have said. And I think from mine and Laura's perspective is because we work at a law firm, and so we're essentially in a client services industry where it's a lot harder to make new connections. And, meeting face to face and person to person, that's what we used to be used to network, to talk to people. And now, so you really, like Laura said, have to be intentional. But I think as we segue into probably your next question around mentorship and networking, there are, industry groups available where you can connect and chat with people. And I think that we are in an era of fatigue with constantly being on video, and giving the option for doing it by telephone call is sometimes a nice way of alleviating that for someone who will say, yeah, sure, I'll join a Zoom call, but in their head, they're probably like, oh God, not again. And will appreciate the idea of, I'm happy to just have a telephone call like we would have done back before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
If we didn't meet face to face, the likelihood is I'd give you a call on your cell phone and you could talk to me while not necessarily, putting on the business talk that we all do now, and just, in a relaxed way. So I think that would be a piece of advice too, is offering not just Zoom calls, but saying, hey, why don't we have a telephone call?
So I'm gonna then now let you start us off with our next subject. I want to move on to mentorships, as you kind of touched on. I think it's a really important topic that we speak about. So what are your thoughts on some of the benefits of mentorships and sponsorships, and some of the female networking organizations that you somewhat mentioned? And maybe let's talk about some of your experiences with mentorship throughout your careers.
So if we're talking about mentorship in my careers, I've been very lucky. I've had some fantastic mentors. I will say that, and I think that this will change, as we can see by this panel, and as we're seeing people move up, at least in our firm, to partner who are female. For the most part, I've had male mentors, and they were fantastic, but there weren't any senior members of the nuclear group who were female who I could kind of approach in a different way, because they would have a different perspective. And sometimes I think that is very important. And so there are groups that are female centered in the nuclear industry that really do help give you that perspective and let you talk to people who understand the female perspective and not necessarily just that. So I'd say mentorship is important, and sometimes you have to go out looking for it because it may not be available at a senior level where you are. Laura, Shelley?
Yeah, no, that's been my experience too, is all men, all the way through my career. Very supportive men who have certainly helped me get to where I need to be, and I am forever grateful to them. And I try where I can to pay that forward when I think about the people that I've had the opportunity to mentor. But I agree, you need to have that support from other women. And I think, yeah, organizations that offer that type of networking are great. I belong to a bunch of legal networks, which, maybe are not quite as exciting, but I mean, it offers me an opportunity to talk to people who are in the same job as me in different industries, who approach problems, leading their teams, motivating their teams, you know, in a way that is helpful to me. And I find that, you know, the women's conferences always have a panel like this where it's talking about how do you achieve balance. And I think at first I found that annoying. Like, how come the men aren't having a conference on, you know, how to manage your calendar? But ultimately, I think, Alexandria, you raised this earlier, like women tend to disproportionately take these things on in their households, no matter how equitable their relationships are. And they take them on behalf of their extended families too, not just in their nuclear family. So I actually think having that support is really meaningful, to just know that you've kind of got a backstop, whatever your internal network looks like, that you've got people out there that you can reach out to that understand what you're going through and can help you out.
Yeah, definitely. Laura, I know you kind of talked about it earlier on some of the organizations that you've been a part of and mentorship. Anything to add?
I would just say I have been fortunate to have some great mentors in my life, but one of the mentor relationships that really stands out for me was a relationship that I formed with someone who is not in the energy field at all. She actually worked for Xerox, and she was a lovely lady. And I think one of the benefits of having a mentor who was outside of the core area in which I'm working is they can come at some of the challenges that I might be talking about experiencing with an entirely different perspective. And, you know, she'd ask questions that would force me to think about things in a totally different way from anyone else who I'd kind of spoken to about that problem. So I think it can be very, very beneficial in your career, no matter what industry you're in, frankly, to look for mentors who might sit outside of your organization and to recognize the benefit of your organization and industry, and recognize that there can be really valuable input from people who are not as familiar with the ins and outs of your industry. The other thing I would say is there is almost an embarrassment of riches right now in terms of the number of organizations that are out there supporting women in nuclear, women in renewable energy. I have found those organizations to be tremendously beneficial in terms of opening my eyes to opportunities that exist within the sector. You know, things change very, very rapidly in this sector. And so, you know, the way the business has been conducted for the last 2 years may not be the way it's going to be conducted 1 month or 6 months from now. And so just be talking to people in the industry about what they're doing, what projects they're working on. You can learn an awful lot. And for anyone who's looking for a job, certainly great way to find out about those opportunities. So I would commend those to anyone who's listening today.
Yeah, that's great. I know, you know, for me as well, I wouldn't be where I am without some of my mentors, both men and women. And I've also part of many different organizations, like as you mentioned, you know, Women in Energy or Women in Renewable Energy, Women in Nuclear. They're all great starting points for meeting and connecting and networking. But we're almost at the end of our session here, so I want to get through a few more. Maybe I'll start with you, Magda. In terms of nuclear law, what is the best resource, in your opinion, of people who want to dive in deeper on the nuclear sector? And maybe if you want to throw in some advice for the ladies that are just starting out.
Okay, so there is so many different organizations that can give you advice or have websites that allow you to dive in a little deeper into what it is. In Canada, and this is a plug because I'm treasurer, but the Canadian Nuclear Law Organization is a great place to start. It's a fairly small domestic law organization with a lot of members that go across the spectrum of the supply chain. So it's from owners, it's from manufacturers, it's from the regulatory perspective. The IAEA, so the International Atomic Energy Agency website has some introductory text on it that will give you kind of a first international nuclear law perspective. The World Nuclear Association, that is kind of where I would start. Laura and Shelley, I don't know if you have some other thoughts.
I think that's pretty comprehensive. I would say too, like nuclear is one of those things where if you don't know a lot about it, it can seem a little bit daunting or a little bit unappealing or a little bit off-putting, in fact, if you don't understand it. So, I mean, just to open your mind to thinking about it as a career path, I think is a great start. Just being willing to explore it and understand it a little bit more, because it is a really exciting area. There's so much opportunity.
And by the way, some of you who are listening in may be younger than some of us panelists are. All of these organizations, most of these organizations have fantastic Instagram pages. So add them there. It's a really accessible way to get to be introduced to some of the content, I think. And you know, it can kind of lead you down that little Instagram rabbit hole into places that you never thought you'd end up. So, but it's very interesting. So, yeah, check that out.
And Shelley's point, none of us are nuclear engineers or nuclear physicists. This isn't, I know it feels scary, and oftentimes when I'm introduced to new people and I say that I'm a nuclear energy lawyer, the assumption is that I must be this extremely brilliant nuclear engineer who understands like the minutia of the physics of a reactor. And that's not necessary. You're not going, if you're starting to dig into nuclear law, that doesn't mean you're going to be digging into the engineering perspective of nuclear, but rather just kind of the issues, especially regulatory and liability issues that are very niche to nuclear, because it's a very different form of power generation than renewables, than anything else. So I do want to reiterate what Shelley said. It sounds dry, it sounds boring, and it sounds like engineering and physics and science. And it's actually very exciting. It is complex, but it's not about the science, and it's about a lot of other things. And I love my job, and I love nuclear law, and that sounds like I'm somewhat boring, but it's very true.
I think that is a very good plug, but I do not want to take away from women in STEM because they're doing some great things also.
No, I didn't mean to.
I know you didn't. I'm just joking. But okay, so we 10 minutes out now. I just want to close things out. Is there anything, I want to give you guys the floor, maybe some last minute thoughts, anything you think that we maybe left out that you want to address? What are your final goodbyes to everybody on the line?
I would maybe say that when you're thinking about a career change or starting out your career, I think what's really important is to understand what your personal values are and look for an organization that aligns with those values, which sounds like a really lofty thing and maybe sort of hard to figure out. But I think if you look at what an organization's executive team is saying, what their board of directors is saying sort of publicly about the organization, what the board of directors and the executive team look like, I think you get a good understanding of whether that's an organization that you feel like you would be able to thrive and succeed in. And I think having a good articulation to yourself about what you're trying to achieve, what is your vision for your personal life and your professional life, I think that's a really good thing to kind of set out, to really understand if the path that you're headed down is going to be sort of sustainable for you, make you happy, make you feel fulfilled in both your personal life and your professional life.
And to Shelley's point, when you're trying to align yourself with an organization that will let you find the fulfillment and the career balance and what you need, don't be scared to reach out by email to people in the organization at whatever entrance level you may want to go, if you can find a way to contact them, because you can get a more fulsome perspective of how that organization works and what it's really like being there by talking to people who work at the level that you're working at. So I think that's always a good idea as well.
That's a good point. And Laura, final thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to show you all that I can be entirely contradictory. And I have spent all this time talking about intentionality. And now the final thought I want to leave you with is I think one of the secrets to a great career is being flexible and taking chances, taking risks, even if they're not part of the plan that you have set out. I would not be in nuclear law today if I had not taken one of those chances. I actually started out my career doing class action defense litigation on behalf of pharmaceutical manufacturers and did that for 4 years until the day that actually it was Christmas Eve when someone came into my office, threw down a 160-page contract and said, I need to understand this by tomorrow. Could you help me? And it turned out that that was a contract for a major project that was going on in the nuclear sphere, and completely changed my life because it opened my eyes to a sector that I had never, I hadn't really known anything about. And it turns out I found that the subject matter was super interesting. Everyone who I've met working in nuclear law is just an amazing person. There's a ton of support out there. It's a great industry. But as I say, I would not be here had I not said yes to that one opportunity that was completely outside of my comfort zone. And I found that I loved it. So as much as you can and I think should be intentional, also remain open to opportunities as they crop up because you never know where they might lead.
That is, I think that's great. That's a similar approach to me for when I first started out as well. I think I was approached maybe an hour before my interview to have an interview at OPG, and I had no idea what energy or nuclear. I didn't even know there was nuclear in Ontario, to be completely honest with you. And I took the call and it was like Googling things as the recruiter's talking to me. Did not think that I was going to get it. Didn't even think that I was going to take it, but took a risk and here I am, and I love it. 4 years later, still loving it. So as we wrap things up, I do want to say thank you to all of you guys again for your time and answering all of our questions. I know being earlier on in my career, I did take a lot of advice from that you guys gave us today. So thank you again. And I am going to pass the mic back over to OCNI for final wrap up.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to everybody on the panel today, to Laura, Magda, and Shelley. It was a pleasure to meet half of you. I've already met Magda a few times, and I'm still in awe of everything she does. And now I've got 2 more people that I bow down to, totally in awe of. If I can say it, totally girl crushing on this panel right now. A lot of what you said resonates with me as well, because I'm new to the nuclear industry. So a lot of what you say also applies to people like myself who are on the operational side and definitely nowhere near the legal side of things. And I know a lot of the individuals who are on the attendee side today had some things to share. And I actually want to read one of the comments from Carrie Thompson. And she wrote, "You have all shared some really brave perspectives on this topic. I really appreciate each of you bringing your authentic self to this conversation. The vulnerability and self-awareness of what you've shared is really refreshing. Thank you for that." And I think that pretty much sums up everything that both Alex and I are feeling right now, as this is the end of day 1 of the She Leads conference. And I'm kind of proud of ourselves, Alex. High five.